So welcome everybody. It's good to see you. And we're going to dive in and get started. So let's take a moment and arrive from whatever you've been doing. And as usual, I'm going to ask you to just get yourself comfortable in whatever you're sitting on. Maybe even before we start, notice the sensation of the support of the chair beneath you, just to kind of remember what that feels like. So if you would please, on the next in-breath, please breathe in through your nostrils, if your nostrils work. If not, it's fine to use your mouth. Notice the physical sensation of the air as it enters your body. Go. Let the out-breath take care of itself. Drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation, again, the physical sensation of the support of the chair beneath you. If you can't quite discern that, sway a little to the right and left so that you're shifting your weight from your right side to your left side, not because you want to be on your side, but just so you can notice, oh yeah, it feels like this. This is what this chair feels like beneath me that's supporting me. And then let's try this again from the beginning. So on the next in-breath, please breathe in and notice the sensation of the air as it enters your nostrils or your throat. Go. Let the out-breath take care of itself. Drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair. And sustain your attention there for a second or two if you can. And know that while you're doing this very simple, quiet practice, you are sending a message with no words. It's totally a physical sensation message. You're sending a wordless message to your brain, the part that responds to stress, that says, actually, I'm okay. You can stop flooding me with adrenaline. Thank you. So it's a way of interrupting the stress response. Reminders for this. It's so easy. It's easy to overlook it. It's easy to forget it. But what I wanted to point out is that practice helps. I'm super good at doing this because I teach it all the time. It forces me to practice, otherwise I'd forget to. But I know exactly how to drop into that feeling. When I do that, I'm interrupting the stress response if I am already flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. I'm already flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. It's not going to just evaporate or vanish by magic. So I need to give my body a little time for the adrenaline and cortisol to dissipate, maybe as much as 15 minutes if I can do that. Depends on what's happening in our lives. But if so, it can be helpful to turn our mind to something other than what caused the stress to begin with. Again, the reason is if we go back to thinking about what we were worried about, nothing wrong with that eventually, but if right now I want to quiet things, if I go back to thinking about the worry, I'll get flooded with more adrenaline. If I don't want that to happen, I'm going to think about something different, at least for a few minutes. And if you haven't already done this, I'm going to ask you to do it again. You don't need to do it right now, but I'm going to ask you to do it. At least think of something right now. Think of one thing that you could do or think about that would help you. And this is a word I don't usually use. It will help you to distract your mind from what you were worried about just for a little while, just so you can catch your breath, right? And each one of us is different. I might like imagining the waves at the beach. That works for me. I grew up with that. I love that. My husband would say, are you crazy? He would want to picture the mountains or pet our dog or have a cup of tea that you like, some kind of tea. It can even be caffeine tea. Who cares? But let's say herbal tea to be fair about this, to get the nervous system quieted down. You could read something. And if you do, I would say probably better not to pick something, a distracting heavy-duty novel, which is fine to do if you want to at times. But for this purpose, maybe something brief, perhaps even inspiring to you. It could be a short passage from someone you like to read. Could be the Dalai Lama, could be Gandhi, could be Martin Luther King, could be, you name whatever works for you. Very handy to have something nearby. either of an image that you know you can turn your mind to, or something written on your iPhone or your Android, whatever you have, or probably a piece of paper stuck in your back pocket that'll give you a verse that you like, a poem, a few lines from somebody that inspire you. The reason I'm asking you to do this now is that when we are the most upset and the most stressed, it's really hard to even remember what the heck is a pleasant way of distracting our mind. We're too busy being immersed in the stress. Does that make sense? Like if I'm in the ICU with my husband, that's not when I'm going to start thinking about the fact that I like the waves of the ocean. But if I know that's my go-to and I'm feeling stressed, I might do a grounding practice and then turn my mind there just briefly to let my nervous system settle. Questions? Yeah. Okay. I would just say again, practice matters, really helps. The last thing you want to do is get in a situation where things are hard and you think, oh, what the heck was that we did in class 3 weeks ago? I know it was useful, but I don't remember what it was. So if you practice it a little, hopefully you don't have to think about it. You just drop into it. Here's an example, maybe familiar territory to some of you. I was in the inner Sunset driving up 4th Avenue, up that kind of steep hill that goes between Irving and Parnassus, if you're familiar with the area. And I'm not sure that was the block I was on. Maybe it was a lower block, but there were cars parked in such a way on my left that the cars were parked perpendicularly because the street was steep. So the cars were facing me as I was driving up the hill. And I saw a big white pickup truck start to pull out. It was going to hit me right in my driver's side door. Guy didn't see me. He was about to do that. I couldn't even get my hand onto the horn that fast. He saw me out of his peripheral vision. Thank goodness he had good reflexes. He slammed on his brakes. He didn't hit me. What do you think my heart was doing? Boom, 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 right? I'm real upregulated. I didn't think about it. I just felt the support of the chair beneath me. That's what I did because I was so used to it. It was amazing. It was like having a brain transplant. It really helped. So just giving you one example. I know that particular grounding practice from people that are trauma therapists. So it's used in trauma resilience and trauma therapy where you talk with someone and they might be telling you a difficult story and they're getting upset. And the therapist might say, let's take a break for a minute. I want to lead you in something that will help you settle your nervous system. It's where I learned this one. It's a good one. You can use others. We've done others. You can use your positive memory. You could use your heart breath. You could use your counted breath. Just reminding you they're out there. I do want to show you something, if I may. I'm going to ask you to turn your attention for a moment to what I'm going to put on the share screen. And this is a list that's called What Works for Me. And this will be in your resources this week. It's not fancy, it's not very detailed, just reminds you of some of the things we've done. Because it's a lot of stuff. I don't expect any of us, including myself, to remember all these things at once. But it's nice sometimes after you've taken a class like this to go back and say, oh yeah, I thought that heart breath was interesting. I think I'd like to practice it. You go back to the class when we went over it, and it'll remind you how to do it. I might not have caught everything on here, but I think I've caught most of the practices. So a couple of them we haven't done yet. The ones down the bottom for renew, the gratitude practice, the wellness journal, but we'll get to those. So I want you to know that's there. You can play around with this and use it any way you like. I'll stop sharing the screen. If you would, please, I'd like you to think about your last week and notice if there was any time you had an opportunity. That's the question. It's always the question, right? Did you have any opportunity this past week to use any of the things you might have learned in this class? It might have been last week we talked about, can I notice who's walking into the room with me? How am I right now in my body and my emotions and my mind? Is that something you did? Or is that something you forgot all about? Maybe you'd like to try it out next week. So give some thought to anything you tried, how it worked for you, how it didn't work. That's fine. And I really wish you well in remembering too that anything you learn in here, as far as I can make out, it's not a one and done. Not a single thing is a one and done. These are lifetime practices. If it's something you like and it works for you, then consider it a practice, just that. Just like you would practice, I don't know, exercise, physical exercises or meditation exercises. They're practices. And if they are not our habitual way of being with our lives, then they take a little effort, perhaps in the beginning, a little resolve to kind of go with them and see what we can do and what we want to carry forward. So thank you uh, for joining me for this. It's been great. So I'd like to talk about today's topic. I think it's a really important one, and it's one we don't always chat a lot about in public somehow. And it's the idea of the difficult emotion of grief and sorrow or chronic sorrow of losses. What is all that about? So, what I'd like to do is talk a little, introduce three different types of grief. They're all the same thing, right? But just three different ways of looking at grief that I would like to talk about a little more. I'd like to talk about some strategies to help you connect with your grief and your losses in an ongoing way, and then some practices to help see our own lives in the bigger picture. I'd also like to mention a few practical details in case they're of interest to you. So that's not a very good description, but it gives you a general idea of where I'd like to go today. So first, I want to just suggest a very simple thing, which is a tool that you already have. I want to remind you about that before I even introduce these three kinds of grief. The tool is simply the first thing you learned in the second class with meeting difficult emotions. Grief is, to be sure, one of many difficult emotions. It's a flavor of sadness, right? Sadness could be, I feel a little blue. It could be major depressive disorder. It could be grief. It could be raw grief, where there are nothing but tears. It could be long-term grief. It could be a lot of things. But just understanding that we have the capacity in order to help ourselves not get totally stuck in the emotion. If we find it's sort of carrying us away a bit more than we want, we can use our cognitive perspective and say, oh, this is grief. That sounds crazy. It's so simple. But just to silently say that in your own mind allows us to realize, even though I'm feeling this grief and I'm feeling a bit sunk in it, I can see that that's what's happening. This is Judy experiencing grief. That's what's going on right now. So that alone provides me with a little perspective. I'm not totally swept away by the grief. And that allows me to choose, what am I going to do next? Maybe I'll say, okay, that's what I'm feeling right now. I need a little break from it. I'm going to do something different. And you could do any one of the practices that we've talked about, a grounding practice, a breath practice, a walk around the block practice, but anything that works for us. And then the soften, soothe, allow works equally well for grief. So soften, soothe, allow is where you find where you feel an emotion in your body, which you may do easily, or you may go, what are you talking about? I can't tell. So if you know right away, yeah, when I'm feeling really sad and I feel grief, I feel it in my throat. So a lot of people say that's where they feel it. Not all. Some say I feel it in my belly. It doesn't matter. But if you know where you feel it, that can be helpful. Send you back to week 2 if you wish to review the soften, soothe, allow practice for meeting difficult emotions. Then you may want to go back and do that. It's a good one. I like it. But I'd like to talk about some new things today, so I'm going to move ahead. When I spoke of 3 kinds of grief, probably there are lots of kinds, but 3 that I hear spoken of a lot. One of them is simply What are my losses right now? So it's sadness, it's the grief that we are most familiar with. And then you've probably heard the term anticipatory grief. All of you heard that one? And that means I know the person that I love has a short prognosis. They're not going to live a whole lot longer. And perhaps I'm feeling grief right now about that. And it's completely appropriate and natural to feel that way. What I want to tell you that surprised me is that some people feel like, oh, I shouldn't feel grief now. My person's still alive. They're okay. I shouldn't feel that way right now. And what the psychologists who have studied it have found is that it's actually okay. You may not feel this. I'm not suggesting everyone feels this way. You might feel annoyed with your person because they've been a major difficult person recently. That's fair too. But today I'm talking about grief. So if you're feeling grief and it's anticipatory grief, that's actually healthy. It's healthy. It's not that you're going to break down and start crying with them, but if you need a little personal time to take some time out for that, it allows you to begin adapting to what's going on so that when you actually experience the loss, there aren't a lot of barriers in the way. We'll talk a little more about that in a few minutes. The third kind of grief that I'd like to at least mention is more of a long-term thing. If your person has an illness that is, and nowadays with cancer, some of the cancers move rapidly. Some of them are extended. Even brain tumors can last for 9 years instead of 9 months. So it's going to be different for every person. We know that. But when it's a long-term loss and you're living with it every day over a long period of time, even if it's not specifically a neurologic illness, there are changes that a person who is experiencing these illnesses can undergo in their personality and the way they feel and the way they behave. And that's who we're with. So we're seeing a person we know perhaps changing, or perhaps not. They may be still the same old cranky person they always were, or the same loving person they always were. I'm just offering this because it can happen either way or both. When it comes to strategies for dealing with the loss right now, there are 4 steps that have been found to be useful. They're not magic, they're not the only steps there are, but I just offer them to you as something to remember is out there. You've probably done a lot of these already. So one of them is simply recognizing and accepting the loss and change that has already occurred from the time your person was diagnosed until now. And we'll do something with that in a few minutes for you to think about that a little bit more. So it's noticing the changes that happened in the past and focusing on the changes that have already occurred. And then the second one, not surprisingly, is flipping it a little bit and considering the losses that are going to occur in the future, the near future or the more distant future, depending on your person's situation and yours. But it's actually allowing yourself to consider it. Not to scare yourself, not to make yourself crazy, but just to allow it into your space, so you understand this could be going on going forward in the future. And the third one is what I said a little bit earlier, which is simply normalizing grief now, even though your person is still alive and talking with you and here on this earth. Having grief now is, number one, it's completely natural. Number two, it's even healthy in that it's a way of adapting now or beginning introducing the adaptation process so that when your person actually passes, there's less likelihood of experiencing complicated grief or prolonged grief, a term that's bandied around a lot, and it really means having grief that has some obstacles in the way of our being able to adapt naturally to the loss. Does that make sense? So I'm not suggesting grief goes away or disappears. If you love someone, it never feels okay to lose someone we love. But eventually, the hope for all of us is that we can adapt and have a life going forward, and to understand that that's okay, and not to have a wall or a barrier or something that prevents us from moving forward. So prolonged grief might occur when someone has some barriers in the way. It might be, oh, I'm never going to go past uh, that intersection again for the rest of my life because that's where I always remember seeing my person, and it just is so upsetting to me. I can't feel okay about that. Um, that's a really simplistic description. Prolonged grief is more complicated than that, but it's a kind of symptom that could occur with it. And then the fourth strategy is reframing the relationship with your person and seeing your new role as a caregiver. You know your caregivers. You don't need me to tell you that. But it's actually considering, how am I reframing my relationship? It's not the same now. It can't be. It doesn't mean it's, and yet there's still elements that are the same. So it's both and. But it's understanding that we're reframing a relationship. So those are actually helpful strategies. I'm not going to talk a lot more about them individually, but what I would like to talk about is that there are many types of losses that care partners face. And I can name a few of them, but I'd like to give you a chance to think about some of the things that you've noticed in broad brushstrokes, um, that are some of the types of losses you may have noticed. For example, it could be a change in your person's personality. It could be a loss of the relationship as it used to be. Right? Maybe this is no longer someone you take long walks in the country with. This is no longer someone you can laugh about certain kinds of jokes with. Don't know. It could be a loss of communication. Depends on the situation. Could be a loss of activities you used to do together. Because it's interesting that naming the losses can help us to see the big picture. It's not as though we're just naming them for the sake of naming them, but it can do that. And it can help us in that process, if they come up, to allow ourselves moments of grief and self-compassion. This is hard. You're going to get through this. The same things we were talking about earlier that Ed said that he was able to use. Can we say those things to ourselves? It's just bringing some kindness to ourselves the same way we would to a dear loved friend. We'd say, this is hard. You can do this. I know you can get through this. I believe in you, whatever it is. But it's being that really fundamental human kindness of being our own best friend. Otherwise, we're expecting other people to be mind readers and know what we really need. We're the ones that actually know inside what we really need, that we can do this for ourselves. It's really important. And it can signal the hope, if we can name the losses, that we can do this fully and come out the other side whole, that we can do this. Okay, we see what the losses are, we see who we are. So I want to mention two things briefly. I'm not going to take time with them, but I think they're so important. Advanced care planning, which I'm guessing all of you have already done. Palliative care, if you want to get palliative care and you think that would be helpful, I would suggest taking a look at it. Remembering, if you're interested in it, it's not hospice, it's larger. It includes hospice as a subset. It does not mean giving up any of your current doctors. It's an extra layer of support to manage symptoms and to bring more team members to be of support if that's useful. And the third one, and I don't know if this would interest anyone or not, it may not, but there are people who are death doulas. I think we've talked about this, or end of life doulas, I think they like to call themselves. And there will be a link in your resources to the End of Life Doula Alliance. If you're just curious, is this anything I'm interested in or not? It can help you learn a little bit more about it. So there are two exercises I'd love to ask you to try out right now, and it'll require you to write something down. So at least, if you could have a pencil and a paper or a device handy, but maybe a pencil or a pen and paper would be the easiest. And before we jump into the exercises, I want to mention something that I mentioned in a previous class, but just to remind you about it. And this will, again, I think, be in your resources this week as well. It's called PTG. Do you know what PTSD is? PTG is post traumatic growth. How's that for something? So, what psychologists noticed is that some people that go through a traumatic situation are really crushed by it, understandably. They need to go through a lot of support to help build themselves back up again. And for some reason, some people are able to go through really difficult things and they're able to come out of it having grown a little stronger in some ways. They've learned things from what they've gone through. And I suggest that idea to you now, not because I want to throw it in your face for any of us, myself either, but just to realize, is there any way in which I'm possibly becoming a better version of me somehow, even though this has been really difficult? Is there anything I'm learning from this? And in your resources, there will be a one of those questionnaires you can say on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm more this way or that way. Reason I'd like to point you toward it is not that I want you to take that test or anything, but if you take a look at it, you can see some of the areas of growth that the psychologists found were most common for people that experience post-traumatic growth. I think it's quite wonderful, really. So that said, I wanted to mention those three things and then come to these exercises. One of them will focus on your person, your relationship to them, and one of them will focus on you and how are you doing and who are you with all this. So when you're focusing on the person you're caring for, what I'd like you to do, and this will be a brief run at this exercise. It's not going to be exhaustive by any means. So just for the next 4 or 5 minutes, what I'd like you to do is write a letter to your person. And it'll be a brief letter, but and by the way, this is not a letter you're going to give your person. This is a letter you get to shred or burn or do whatever you want. This is just for you to have this practice. So write a brief letter naming what you miss and how you feel that they've changed since they were diagnosed. And in some cases, you may feel like there's some ways that you've learned more and things have become, you can write anything you want. But if there are things that you miss, the intention of the exercise initially is to write a letter to name what you miss and how you feel your person has changed since they've been diagnosed. So why don't you give that a little bit of time? And it's something that it's in your home practice for you to do in more depth if you wish to, but try it out for now. I will say just about 30 more seconds. If there's anything that has gotten your interest and you'd like to write more or think more about it, then just make a note of it to yourself. Once again, just a reminder that this is not something to leave lying around on the dining room table. It's just for you. And please treat it that way as a piece of confidential information that you'll destroy or shred or do whatever you think makes sense. Yeah. So it's just a chance to name the losses and to be able to see the bigger picture from more of a 35,000-foot view rather than the close up view that sometimes takes up all the space. So when you're ready, if you would put that one aside for right now. So so that's an exercise where you're focusing on losses that may have occurred over time since your person was diagnosed. The other exercise that I'd like you to try out is one where you think about yourself and see if you can do this. And I'm going to ask you to write a few bullet points, 4 bullets on each one of the following 3 things. Um, so you know what I mean by bullet, just a bullet point, not a little phrase or a word. So see if you can come up with 4 things, write down 4 things that would describe you, 4 words or phrases that would have described you before your person was diagnosed, who you were then. And you can probably hear what's coming next. So for the second question or instruction, it's would you please now write down 4 things that you feel describe you now that you're fully immersed in being a caregiver, to whatever degree that's true for you. Raise your hand if you'd like a little more time. Okay. So now I'd like you to write down 3 words or phrases that you hope will describe you in the future, informed by this experience. In the future, meaning perhaps after your person has passed, but four, 4 things that you hope will describe you then. Okay. Listen, let me just explain to you one of the reasons I really like this practice, um, and it stands out to me. There was a caregiver that I had been seeing for a long time because her husband was going through a very long term, difficult illness over many years. And then he died, and he died with her around in good support. And she was a caregiver that, from my perspective, I would say she had lots of resources. She had a pretty stable family that was helpful to each other, supportive of each other. She had financial resources. She had had a wonderful career. Her husband had a wonderful career. They both felt good about that. She had lots of things going for them. When her husband died, she said to me, and it's just, she said, "I don't know who I am anymore. I've been 24/7 caregiver all this time. I don't even know who I am anymore." And so that's just one example. And we talked about a lot of things, and she certainly was able to connect back with them. But it took her a good bit of time to do that. She'd lost touch with who she was. Not that who she was wasn't always there. And what's been found is that if we can consider the future in whatever way feels okay to us, it might be, is there something you've been putting on hold that it's okay to put it on hold. You don't have time for it now. You don't want to do it now, but you'd like to get back to it. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you're a hiker. Maybe you're a mountain climber. I don't know. Or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's simply being with some of your good friends or taking trips together, things you can't do now, but that you might like to bring back into your life whenever it makes sense in the future. It can be surprisingly a helpful thing to recognize a little bit now, not to make yourself sad, but just to remember that there is your life in the future, your adapted life, and that's something to just see the reality of now in order to help live now as fully as you're already living it and still know that you can come out whole. And that's what I would wish for each of you. And the topic of grief, oh, I wanted to show you a grief cartoon. This is, everybody has heard, I take it, of the many stages of grief, and there are different versions of them. But this is my favorite cartoon about the stages of grief. Okay, have you seen this one before? Okay. So it's not going to be one way or another way for any one of us. It's going to be whatever it is for each of us. And what I would hope, and this is in your resources if you want to play around with it and just have it, it's there. But what I would hope for each of us is that we have the ability to to grow in some way from an experience we may wish we had never had, and to be able to live our lives in a way that feels good. Well, thank you for considering it. And um, the home practice this week will be very much what you just did in class. It's going to ask you to revisit, if you feel like it would be helpful to you. You revisit the letter that you wrote, not in order to review the one you already wrote, but just to see if you were to do it fresh, what it would look like. And to consider particularly the idea of the four bullets that you wrote, looking at the past, the present, and looking again at the ones for the future and what you would like them to be. Yeah, be able to bring some choices to the process. So may the goodness that arises through our practice be for the good of all beings everywhere, including ourselves. So thank you, everyone. I wish you a wonderful week.